By 6 a.m., the first truck is already dumping 3 tons of yesterday's junk. By nightfall, that same pile will be glowing orange steel, ready to become something new. This is one full day inside the largest scrapyard on the planet, and it never stops moving. Most people see a junkyard and they see garbage. But what happens inside these gates in the next 16 hours will challenge everything you think you know about where things come from and where they go. Because last year alone, this facility moved enough metal to build the Golden Gate Bridge 3 times over. But that is not the number that matters. The number that matters is 1,650 degrees. Because once you understand what happens when metal reaches that temperature, you will never look at a wrecked car the same way again. Stay with me. The real journey does not start at the furnace. It starts right now at 6 a.m. when the gate rolls open and the first truck of the day pulls in. The clock reads 6:01. The overnight security guard, Mike, swings the main gate wide, and within 60 seconds, the first truck is backing onto the inbound scale. 30 tons of twisted rebar, crushed appliances, and what used to be a 1998 Ford F-150. The scale operator, a man named Terry who has worked this yard for 27 years, prints a ticket and waves the driver through. That truck will make this same trip 3 more times before noon. There are 400 trucks just like it already on the road right now, all converging on this address. But here's what you need to know before this day really begins. The United States recycles over 46 million metric tons of iron and steel from scrap every year. That is more metal by weight than the entire American automobile industry produces new. And this single yard processes over 1 million tons of it. We are standing inside a machine that never stops eating. The shredder alone consumes 20 cars every 60 seconds. In the time it takes me to explain how the furnace works, another 50-ton load of yesterday's world will be arriving at the gate. Most people picture a scrapyard as a graveyard. It is the opposite. It is a refinery. The metal in your phone, the steel in your refrigerator, the aluminum in the plane you flew on last summer, statistically, at least some of it started its second life here, in piles like the ones now rising 40 feet on either side of me. And the process has not changed at its core in 120 years. Sorting, shredding, melting. But the stakes have. Because one mistake inside this yard changes lives forever. And that is exactly what nearly happened at 11:42 this morning. The crane operator, a veteran named Ray, tells me that the hardest part is the waiting. He sits in a glass box 100 feet above the ground, staring down at a mountain of mangled steel. His claw descends, grabs 7 tons of scrap, and swings it toward the mouth of the electric arc furnace. Inside, the temperature will soon hit 1,650 degrees Celsius, 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to turn solid iron into liquid in under 90 seconds. Ray's first normal load of the day is suspended midair when suddenly his radio crackles. A spotter on the ground has seen something. Something that should not be in the pile. Something that, if it enters that furnace, will explode with the force of a military-grade mortar. And Ray has exactly 4 seconds to decide what to do next. Ray does not think. 27 years on that crane have wired his reflexes into something faster than thought. His right hand pulls the joystick back, the claw lurches upward, and 7 tons of twisted steel swing away from the furnace mouth, missing the rim by 3 feet. The load drops onto a safety pad 40 yards to the west. The yard goes silent. Everyone has heard the radio call. A spotter named Luis walks toward the pile with a flashlight and a dosimeter, because what Ray almost fed into 3,000 degrees of molten iron was a 1953 artillery shell, still live, still packed with enough explosive to turn the entire furnace bay into shrapnel. The local bomb squad arrives 40 minutes later. They evacuate the East Quadrant. By noon, the shell is gone. Ray is drinking coffee in the break room, and the yard is running again. But the question no one stops asking is how something built to level a hillside ended up in a pile of scrap metal. The answer, it turns out, has everything to do with why this industry is worth $117 billion a year and why almost no one outside it knows the first thing about how it actually works. Because for every near miss like Ray's, 1,000 other loads arrive without incident. And those loads are what fuel a process that turns junk into new steel in less time than it takes to watch a movie. The United States recycles 80 million tons of steel annually. More than aluminum, more than glass, more than paper. Steel is the most recycled material on Earth by volume. And the machine that makes that possible is the shredder. Imagine a drum the size of a bus spinning at 600 revolutions per minute. Inside, 40-pound manganese hammers swing on pivots, striking the scrap 2,000 times a minute. The shredder at this facility consumes 20 cars every 60 seconds. A full-size sedan enters as a recognizable vehicle. 13 seconds later, it exits as fist-sized fragments falling onto a conveyor belt. In the time you just spent hearing this sentence, another car disappeared. But here's the part that surprised me. Even after shredding, the metal is still a mess. Copper wire mixed with steel, aluminum castings tangled with rubber and plastic. Separating it is where the real precision begins. A massive magnetic drum lifts the ferrous material while everything else falls away. An eddy current separator kicks non-ferrous metals like aluminum and copper off a separate belt using a magnetic field that actually repels them. And then there is the human eye. Jenna, the yard's lead sorter, has worked this line for 11 years. She can tell the difference between 304 stainless and 316 stainless by the way light hits a wet surface. She catches what the magnets miss. A piece of titanium medical implant. A catalytic converter that still holds platinum worth more than its weight in scrap steel. A solid brass valve from a steam locomotive that predates the Second World War. That valve is headed to a collector in Germany who will pay $1,200 for it. Jenna finds it at 10:47 a.m., plucks it off the belt, and sets it in a bin marked Save. The yard will make more money from that bin this week than from 200 tons of shredded steel. That is the secret of this business. The real profit is not in the mountain. It is in the needle inside the mountain. Now all of this sorted steel, millions of pounds of it, converges on a single point. The electric arc furnace. Picture a cylindrical vessel 30 feet across, lined with heat-resistant bricks so dense it can absorb direct lightning. 3 graphite electrodes descend through the roof, each one thicker than a telephone pole. When the power comes on, an electric arc jumps from the electrodes to the scrap, carrying 60 million volt amps of electricity. The temperature at the arc core hits 6,000 degrees Fahrenheit, hotter than the surface of the sun. The furnace bay becomes a thunderstorm trapped indoors. The sound alone registers at 120 decibels, loud enough to cause permanent hearing damage in under 10 seconds. And yet, the woman who runs this furnace, Darlene, has been doing it for 16 years. She wears double hearing protection and reads the molten metal by the color of the slag floating on top. Right now, the first full batch of the day is approaching pour temperature. 40 tons of solid scrap will become liquid. But before Darlene can tap the furnace, she needs the lab results. Because if the chemistry is wrong, if there is too much copper, too much phosphorus, or not enough carbon, this entire batch fails. It gets scrapped. She stares at her screen, waiting for the spectrometer numbers. And when they finally come through, the reading shows something that should be impossible. Darlene leans closer to the screen. The spectrometer is reading a spike in the gamma spectrum, a signature that does not belong in construction-grade steel. Cesium-137. The entire batch is contaminated. Her hand slams the emergency stop. The electrodes retract. The furnace bay locks down. Above the roar of dying machinery, a klaxon sounds 3 short blasts, and every worker inside the bay knows exactly what it means. Orphan source. A radioactive source has been accidentally shredded and fed into the melt. If Darlene had tapped the furnace even 90 seconds earlier, the contamination would have vaporized, spread through the dust collection system, and coated every surface in the building. The cleanup would have taken 18 months and cost north of $40 million. She just saved the yard from a catastrophe. But here's the part that will keep you up tonight. This is not rare. Between 1993 and 2006, North American steel mills recorded 47 confirmed meltings of radioactive material. The most infamous case happened in 1984 at a mill in Juarez, Mexico. A medical teletherapy unit containing cesium-137 was sold as scrap. It was melted, and the contaminated steel was fabricated into table legs and rebar. Some of that rebar was shipped to the United States. It was only discovered by pure chance when a delivery truck drove past a radiation detector at Los Alamos National Laboratory. That single orphan source forced the recall of thousands of tons of steel and triggered a billion-dollar overhaul of monitoring protocols across the entire continent. Today, every gate in this yard is lined with radiation portal monitors. The shredder is equipped with gamma detectors. And yet, a source roughly the size of a AAA battery still managed to slip through, hidden inside a piece of pipe from a demolished industrial building. The safety team pinpoints it within 32 minutes. A technician in a full hazmat suit extracts the capsule with a pair of long-handled tongs and places it into a shielded container. The contaminated pipe is cut away and set aside for federal disposal agents who will arrive tomorrow. The delay costs the yard $83,000 in lost production and overtime. And that number barely scratches the surface of what the industry loses to bad scrap every single year. But even with the threat neutralized, the furnace must pour. Because steel does not wait. The batch chemistry, once cleared, will still be within spec. Darlene gets the nod from the lab. The electrodes descend again. The arc reignites. And 40 minutes later, the first ladle of the day tilts forward, and a river of liquid steel, bright as a magnesium flare, pours into a waiting tundish and down into a continuous caster. Stage 2 safety glasses are mandatory now. The steel glows at 2,900 degrees Fahrenheit, and staring at it unprotected would sear your retinas in seconds. The heat punches through the viewing window like an open oven door the size of a freight elevator. Now consider what you are actually watching. The steel flowing into those molds has almost certainly been recycled before, not once, not twice, but possibly 20 times. Steel is the only major structural material on Earth that can be recycled infinitely without any loss of strength. The atoms being shaped into billets right now may have held up a bridge in 1920, formed the hull of a Liberty ship in 1944, and spent the last 30 years as a refrigerator in a house in Ohio. Infinity in molten form. That is why steel is the most recycled material by weight on the planet. 80 million tons a year in the United States alone. By 4 p.m., the billets emerge from the caster, glowing a deep cherry red, and are cut to length by automated torches. They will cool overnight in the yard and ship out by rail in the morning. The steel that left the gate this morning as a rusty fender will depart tomorrow as a structural beam destined for a hospital wing in Cincinnati. One full day. Sunrise to nightfall. Junk to infrastructure. But before the sun goes down, I need to show you the one part of this yard that never makes it into the promotional videos. Because the furnace did not just reveal a near miss today. It revealed a problem the entire industry is quietly trying to solve, and it is buried under a black mountain of waste you can see from space. Stay with me. The mountain is called slag. Every time the furnace pours, a layer of impurities floats to the top, silica, lime, oxidized metals, and is skimmed off like foam from a boiling pot. This yard alone produces 400,000 tons of it every year. For decades, slag was just waste. Trucked to a landfill, buried, forgotten. But the industry has spent the last 20 years discovering something that should have been obvious from the start. That black mountain is not garbage. It is aggregate. Crushed slag replaces gravel in roadbeds and railroad ballast. It strengthens concrete. It filters wastewater. And in places like Germany and Japan, nearly 100% of steel slag is now reused. The United States is catching up. This yard now sells 30% of its slag to a cement plant 60 miles away. By decade's end, the company expects to reach 80% reuse. That is an extra $14 million a year from material they used to pay someone to haul away. And this is the larger truth that one full day inside a scrapyard reveals. The line between waste and resource is almost never permanent. It shifts with technology, with economics, with human attention. The artillery shell that almost killed Ray was waste to whoever tossed it, but the brass casing alone was worth $800 as scrap. The cesium capsule that contaminated Darlene's furnace was waste to the demolition crew that tore down an old hospital wing, but it nearly became a $40 million disaster because no one looked. The slag mountain that sat ignored for 30 years is now a revenue stream because someone finally asked the right question. Nothing in this yard arrives as a finished product. Everything arrives as a decision. Classify this as trash or classify it as raw material. At 5:47 p.m., the sun drops below the western tree line and the yard lights flicker on. The last truck of the day clears the outbound scale carrying 42,000 pounds of steel billets. They are still warm. The driver, a man named Ellis, will deliver them to a fabrication plant in Indianapolis by 2 a.m. By next Tuesday, that steel will be bolted into the skeleton of a children's hospital. The 1998 Ford F-150 that rolled through the gate at 6:01 this morning is now part of that building. It will outlast the man who drove it, the factory that built it, and probably the road it once traveled. Steel does not die. It just waits for the furnace. And that brings me to the one number I have not told you yet. A number that changes how you should think about every piece of metal you will touch for the rest of your life. On average, a recycled steel beam contains 60% less embodied energy than one made from virgin ore. The 20 million tons of steel recycled in America this year will save enough electricity to power 18 million homes. That is not a rounding error. That is the difference between a planet that runs out of resources and a planet that figured out how to reuse them forever. The scrapyard is not the last stop. It is the starting line. And tomorrow morning, when the gates open again at 6 a.m., the entire cycle will begin again, with a new pile of yesterday's junk and a new chance to get it right. Tomorrow morning, the gate opens again. Another 1,000 trucks. Another 1,000,000 pounds of metal that will outlast everyone reading this sentence. And if this day taught me anything, it is that we are surrounded by things we call waste that are actually waiting. Waiting for someone to see the value, to ask the right question, to turn a problem into a resource. The scrapyard does that every single day in plain sight, while the rest of us drive past without looking. The question I keep coming back to is not about steel. It is about everything else in your life that you have been told is garbage. What mountain are you ignoring because nobody told you it was worth something? If that idea makes sense to you, if this changed how you see that pile of junk at the edge of town, then hit subscribe. And there is a special offer I want to put in front of you. The link is in the first pinned comment below. It is the best way to take the next step, and I think you will like it. I will see you at the gate. 6 a.m. Don't be late.